This is the last man on Earth. All the wealth in the world belongs to him. And the first step to owning the entire world is to use a crowbar to unlock the door of a $50 million mansion estate, then drive a luxury bus to the museum and haul back priceless paintings by Van Gogh, Picasso, and Da Vinci, worth a total of $300 million. He even decorates the walls with them. Next, he places the dinosaur skull from the Cretaceous period on the dining table as a decoration. He also showcases a signed baseball jersey from the greatest American baseball player, Ruth, and Michael Jordan's number 23 Bulls jersey, worn in his final game. He even manages to obtain the spacesuit worn by Armstrong, the first person to leave footprints on the moon. Finally, he perfectly arranges his Eden with 2 Oscar statuettes as table decorations. The only drawback is that there is no electricity. A man named Phil thought that once he became rich, he would be happy for the rest of his life, but a life without people is even more unbearable than death. It turns out that a year ago, a virus broke out, causing all the people on Earth to disappear, leaving only Phil as the last survivor. He drives a big bus with a loudspeaker, searching everywhere for other survivors. The result is not even a ghost in sight. So, Phil writes on the billboard in his hometown, Tucson City has living people. He is the last human on Earth. Everything valuable on Earth belongs to him. But as time goes by, he starts to mentally break down and talks to inanimate objects, various balls around him, such as soccer, basketball, rugby, pool, and ping pong, become his good companions. At first, when Phil gets hungry, he goes to the supermarket and loots it extensively, taking all the romantic action films with him to watch his mealtime dramas. If he feels lonely, he goes to the women's clothing store and passionately confesses to the female mannequins, "Rose, I am your Jack," even planting a kiss on one of them. The next moment, he dismembers the mannequin's arm, a stark reminder of how cruel reality is. To avoid boredom, Phil plays racquetball at home, bowling outside, and even upgrades his games, using a desk lamp as a bottle pin in one round, and knocked into a pile of debris by a bowling ball, and turning a fish tank into a bottle pin in the next. He sends bowling balls with the inertia of a car, and the fish tank shatters like fireworks. As the game reaches its highest level, Phil pushes a car down a slope, creating a loud crash as it collides with another car, resulting in a blazing fire. He has a blast playing. However, after the excitement fades, loneliness sets in again. Phil then uses a diesel generator to watch a movie called Cast Away, hoping to find a way to break the monotony. But the protagonist in the movie faces a situation similar to Phil's. No one around, only talking to objects. Phil mocks the protagonist, declaring that he would never end up like him. The last man on Earth is going through a tough time. Without water, he brushes his teeth with alcohol. With no flushing toilet, he digs a hole in the diving board, using the swimming pool as his makeshift toilet. The smell can be detected for miles around, and the mansion has turned into a garbage dump. After a full 2 years, he finally succumbs to mental breakdown. Phil pours various types of alcohol, whiskey, Lafite, margarita, and more, into an inflatable pool. He then bathes and drinks, trying to make himself happy. Every afternoon, Phil goes to a nearby bar to chat with various balls, each of which he has given a name: Jimmy, Greg, Kevin, Antoine, Trevor, Trent, Dabby, Bryce, Marshall, Peter, Thomas, Max, Dashiell, Diego, Clement. Finally, on this fateful day, Phil decides to give up his life and head to heaven. On a rock, he writes his epitaph, and on another rock below, he draws the shape of a target. The last man on Earth is ready to end his life. He presses the accelerator, preparing for the impact. But at that moment, he suddenly slams on the brakes. It turns out he sees smoke not far away, indicating the presence of survivors nearby. Phil rushes over to find tents, cars, and a charcoal stove. Most importantly, he discovers a piece of women's underwear. Phil is overjoyed. There's a woman among the survivors. As a result, he happily faints. When Phil wakes up again, he is stunned to see an exceptionally beautiful woman. He is still lying on her lap, gazing at her with a smile. Unable to resist, they share a kiss, but Phil senses that the woman is giving him artificial respiration. The next moment, Phil sees a middle-aged woman with curly hair performing CPR on him. It turns out that it was all just a dream. The last man on Earth finally encounters a woman, but she is not visually appealing to Phil. His dream is shattered, and he wishes he had not met her. However, the woman insists on being his neighbor, and even talks about having children together. Phil, with a look of disdain, says, "Have you ever heard a saying? Even if everyone else on Earth is dead, I still wouldn't go to bed with you. The middle-aged woman is named Carol. She came to the area after seeing the information Phil had written on a billboard, aware of Phil's aversion to her. Carol recalls the saying that to win a man's heart, you must first capture his stomach. In front of Phil, Carol eats tomatoes she grew herself, enticing him to sneak into her garden at night to steal tomatoes. He ends up with tomato residue all over his beard and clothes. Getting caught by Carol, however, Phil still refuses to agree to have children. After a few days, the tomatoes are gone. Carol explains that without water, tomatoes can't survive. Phil, feeling guilty for consuming so much, decides to fix the water pipes and creates an irrigation system for Carol's vegetable garden. Carol is touched by this gesture, and Phil realizes that a life with companionship is better than a boring one. He decides to agree to Carol's proposal of having children together. However, Carol clarifies that she only has children with her husband, and suggests marrying Phil instead. Phil is a playboy. Now, he is the only man left on Earth, and Carol is the last woman. The reproduction of humanity depends solely on them. So, he takes her to a jewelry store, smashes open the jewelry cabinet with a hammer, and puts all the diamond rings on Carol's hands. Then, they had a wedding in a church, and spent the night together. However, Phil has a condition. They can only live together during the reproductive process, and the rest of the time they must live separately. He calls it absence makes the heart grow fonder, to stabilize the marital relationship. After marriage, they play racquetball together, engage in risky games, and arrange beer bottles in a row. They use a steamroller to crush each bottle one by one. Carol even destroys Phil's dream lover, a female model, although the lover is gone. Other joys are magnified. Phil thinks it's great, but as the saying goes, what goes up must come down. When you feel very happy, unexpected events can happen. One day, Phil and Carol were on their way to the supermarket, suddenly collide with a luxury car that is driving by. The last man on Earth is going crazy, just married an unattractive woman. Then, he encounters a beautiful woman. They have a car accident. Phil gets out of the car to check the situation, only to see a beautiful woman coming out of a luxury car. Phil is instantly smitten. He wants to go over and strike up a conversation, but the car explodes. He can only let the beautiful woman give them a ride back. Phil quickly sits in the front passenger seat, looking regretfully at the beautiful woman. Why didn't she appear earlier? If she had, he wouldn't have married Carol. The beautiful woman's name is Jane. She also found her way here after seeing the billboard. The Phil couple brings Jane home. Phil goes upstairs and undergoes a transformation, shaving off his beard and putting on new clothes, restoring his handsome appearance to entertain Jane. At the dinner table, Phil exudes male hormones, trying to seduce Jane, but Jane doesn't mess around with married men. She directly gets up and leaves. Unexpectedly, in the middle of the night, Jane, dressed provocatively, comes to Phil's bedside, asking Phil to find happiness together. Phil, drooling, quickly follows, only to see Carol sitting on the toilet, cursing at him. If you dare to cheat, I'll cut off your third leg. Phil is immediately awakened. It turns out it was just a nightmare. The last man on Earth decides to pursue Jane. He intentionally exercises shirtless, making Jane bend over for his physique, but his chest is a dense forest, nearly making Jane vomit. Phil also gives Jane a car, but compared to Jane's luxury car, this car is a defective product. The more Jane rejects Phil, the more it fuels Phil's desire to conquer. One day, Phil confides in Carol, "My dear, I suddenly thought, after our child is born, we can only reproduce with close relatives, resulting in a bunch of deformed children." So Phil expresses, willing to donate his sperm, to have a child with Jane, and create a better future for humanity. Carol is immediately furious, seeing through Phil's intentions. Then she angrily scolds Jane, calling her a promiscuous green tea bitch. But Jane insists, Phil is just a jerk. She would never betray Carol. However, Carol has a change of heart. If Phil only has a child with her, humanity won't be able to reproduce. So she is willing to make a sacrifice, agreeing for Phil to have a child with Jane. The wife agrees to let her husband have a child with someone else. The husband is overjoyed. That evening, he arranged a fireworks show, with guitar accompaniment. If Carol finds out, she would probably faint in the bathroom. But just as the two were about to do the deed, a red sports car appears, and a wealthy man comes out of it. It turns out this sports car guy just saw the fireworks, and found his way here. Now the situation is 2 men and 2 women. Jane could easily have a child with this man. Phil's heart is in turmoil. It's like shooting himself in the foot. The sports car guy is called Big Joe. His parents passed away when he was very young. He was also bullied by classmates in school. This tragic experience quickly gains Jane's sympathy. The next day, Jane takes Big Joe to the amusement park to have fun. Jealousy boils in Phil's heart. He must show his manly qualities to win Jane's heart. Phil suggests going to play tennis, the man specifically takes off his clothes to showcase his muscular physique, only to reveal that the dense forest on his chest has been completely shaved off. Then he asks Big Joe to take off his clothes too. Phil thinks, as long as Jane sees Big Joe's excess fat, she will lose interest in him. But unexpectedly, Big Joe has a scar on his body. It's from when he removed a kidney to save his brother. This quality of kindness attracts Jane even more. However, strangely, at night, Jane sleeps with Phil, but the next moment, Phil discovers that Big Joe is also in bed. Startled, Phil screams in horror. It turns out it's another dream. Upon waking up, he hears lively music in Jane's house, having ominous suspicions. During the day, Phil hurriedly asks Big Joe what happened with the music last night. Big Joe tells him they slept together last night. Phil is furious, gritting his teeth. He drowns his sorrows in alcohol, wishing he could kill Big Joe. In the following days, whether day or night, Phil can hear the music. Phil is driven to madness by jealousy. He can only use the excuse of disturbing the peace to persuade Jane and Big Joe to have sex less frequently. Little did Phil know, they decide to make him clean the pool, or else they'll end their friendship with him. The last man on Earth filled the swimming pool with excrement, only to encounter 3 other humans. Due to the unbearable stench, he had no choice but to clean the pool. Wearing protective gear, he used a hose and a fishing net to laboriously clear the mess. In frustration, Phil threw his tools into the pool and accidentally fell in himself, ending up with a foul-smelling bath. Phil blamed his miserable situation on Big Joe and thought that if Big Joe disappeared, he could become the sole man on Earth and win over Jane. Determined, Phil took Big Joe for a drive in the desert, pretending there was a problem with the tires and asking Big Joe for help checking them. In the next moment, Phil floored the gas pedal, leaving Big Joe stranded. However, a few hundred meters later, Phil stopped the car. Torn between his anger and morality, he angrily shouted and pounded the steering wheel, because he just couldn't bring himself to do such a wicked thing. On the desolate road with no signs of life, Phil alternated between moving forward and backward, engaged in an internal struggle against his inner villain. Meanwhile, Big Joe, still oblivious, thought Phil was testing the tires. After half an hour of inner conflict, Phil reluctantly let Big Joe back into the car. Returning home, Phil, clad in protective gear, endured the noxious fumes to clean the swimming pool, hoping to show Jane that he was a clean and handsome man. Unfortunately, she still didn't give him a second glance. Phil went to the bar to share his woes with his buddies, wondering how he could catch Jane's eye. As he exited the bar, a cow suddenly appeared in his field of vision. Phil excitedly discovers a cow. He brings the cow in front of everyone, expressing his intention to turn the cow into burgers, so everyone can enjoy a delicious meal. Jane, however, expresses that Phil is too cruel. Big Joe tells everyone he has worked on a farm, not only raising cows but also milking them. This delights Jane. Once again, Big Joe steals Phil's thunder. So, in the middle of the night, Phil secretly unties the cow, locking it inside the bar. Then the next day, he tells everyone the cow mysteriously disappeared. Then he brings the cow in front of everyone again. Now he becomes the hero who found the lost cow. Surely, Jane will be impressed, but the problem is, everyone splits up to search for the cow. Jane actually finds the bar. Phil gets nervous, but Jane comes out quickly, and the cow is not following her. Phil is puzzled. He quickly sneaks into the bar, only to discover that the cow is really gone. Phil drives around looking for the cow, but at that moment, Big Joe is leading the cow. Appearing on the road, Phil is furious. Why is Big Joe always so lucky? But Big Joe is self-blaming, saying that he lost the cow himself, so he gives the credit for finding the cow to Phil. This makes Phil feel guilty. However, this regained loss doesn't win Jane's heart. Instead, in the middle of the night, the cow breaks into Carol's house, treating it like its own stable. Now Carol has to live with Phil. The last man on Earth is very unhappy. After a long search, he finds a woman, but she's unattractive. They sleep together. Carol is very happy, but Phil is tormented, because Carol snores, and Carol wears an oxygen mask to block out the noise, resulting in even louder snoring. Not only that, Carol draws cute little animals on various world-famous paintings. Dogs, ducks, you name it. And she deleted all of Phil's romantic movies. He runs to the supermarket and puts a fire in the shopping cart to vent his frustration. God, why are you so cruel to me? Phil urgently hopes that everything can start over, but the next moment, a car appears in front of Phil, and 2 girls come out of it. Phil can hardly believe it. Is this God's compensation for him? They are a pair of sisters. The one in black is called Jessica. The one in red is called Monica. They also found their way here after seeing the billboard. The sisters are very excited, quickly asking Phil if there are other survivors here. Phil hesitates for a moment and then says, "In this city, there is only him." The purpose is not to let others disturb the romantic encounter he finally got. The last man on Earth unexpectedly encounters a pair of sisters. Phil arranges for the sisters to stay in a hotel. Then he quickly goes back and changes into a suit, holding 2 bottles of good wine. He appears in front of the sisters looking like a gentleman. The sisters are also dressed in formal attire and have prepared a sumptuous meal, dining together with Phil. Phil is already a playboy. He has all the moves to charm the ladies. Both sisters express the desire to have sex with Phil, but then the sisters notice that Phil is wearing a wedding ring. Phil quickly comes up with a cover story, saying he had a wife named Carol, who unfortunately passed away in the virus outbreak. He also mentions that before Carol's death, she urged Phil to remarry and live a good life. This lie immediately elicits sympathy from the sisters. Then Jessica suggests going for a hot spring swim to help Phil forget his sorrows. Phil is excited, even taking off his pants on the way, preparing to be a bit naughty later. But just then, a car suddenly appears ahead. The sisters are delighted. They've encountered more survivors. People come out of the car opposite, and it turns out to be Carol and the others. Phil quickly lies down in the back seat, frantically putting on his pants, not daring to let Carol discover him. But the truth can't be hidden. The sisters introduce Phil to Carol and the others. Carol instantly recognizes Phil. The truth is revealed. The last man on Earth wants to flirt with girls, but his wife catches him. Phil becomes a womanizer full of lies. Everyone ignores him. Then they each drive away in their cars. It takes Phil 3 hours to walk back. As a result, Carol doesn't let Phil into the house. Phil can only move to the bar. Once again, he's back to being all alone, with a life where he can only talk to various balls. Phil drinks every day, immersed in alcohol. When tired, he sleeps on the pool table. After a week, Phil can no longer bear the loneliness, so he actively goes to everyone, admits his actions, and tells Carol he doesn't really like her, so he shouldn't have agreed to marry her and made her sad. After saying that, Phil returns to the bar, but Carol follows him, bringing out a divorce agreement for Phil to sign, because she also understands forcing something doesn't make it sweet. She shouldn't force Phil to be with her. Now Phil is finally free. The last man on Earth finally divorces his wife. The 2 sisters invite Phil. Jessica wants to go on a drive with him. Monica wants to go mountain climbing with him. To ensure a smooth date, Phil erases the words on the billboard, "Alive people in Tucson," and changes it to "Move to Tampa." But the next second, the ladder slides directly to the ground. Phil screams in shock. The billboard is 5 meters above the ground. And without the ladder, he can only wait to die. Phil shouts for help, but there's no one around. It's still noon. The sun is scorching, so Phil puts his clothes over his head and hangs his pants on the edge of the billboard, hoping to block the sun, but the pants are blown away by the wind. 4 hours pass. The sisters still don't see Phil. Phil's beautiful dream is once again shattered. When Phil wakes up from unconsciousness, the sun has already set. His face is sunburned. He lies in a pickup truck. Soon, it becomes dark. A burly man carries Phil, bringing him to Carol and the others. The man is called Johnson, once a special forces soldier. His dark skin, muscular build, and handsome appearance clearly look like a high-quality man who can father many children. The last man on Earth is about to collapse. Suddenly, a burly man appears. Now even the girls are not staying calm, instantly gaining the favor of all the beautiful women. Even Carol, who usually dresses casually, switches to a charming white dress, truly stunning Phil. As soon as Johnson arrives, he solves quite a few problems. First, the cow that stayed at Carol's house is slapped away to the grassland by Johnson, earning the admiration of Jane. Next, the sisters intentionally damage the generator, so Johnson can fix it, creating opportunities to spend time together. Then Carol directly launches a heartwarming attack, knitting a scarf for Johnson. Not only that, Johnson fixes the power supply and connects the high-speed heater to the reservoir, allowing everyone to have hot water for bathing. He's like a considerate bodyguard, making the beautiful women feel extra secure. Phil and Big Joe are jealous to the point of going crazy. First, Phil's several driving trips are always intercepted by someone. Then Big Joe, worried that Jane might be attracted to Johnson, frequently quarrels with Jane, resulting in their breakup. And on this evening, Phil unexpectedly hears a certain sound. The last man on Earth suddenly discovers that Johnson, who just arrived, is involved with his ex-wife. Phil suddenly feels like he's been cuckolded. He wants to team up with Big Joe to throw Johnson into the desert, so he can't come back. This scene seems familiar. Big Joe instantly recalls when Phil once used a flat tire as an excuse, nearly leaving him behind. Now Big Joe understands. Phil wanted to kill him at that time. The alliance between the two instantly collapses. Phil can only go to salvage his relationship with Carol, because only Carol is still willing to pay attention to him. Phil gives Carol a bouquet of flowers and a pile of jewelry, He even writes a song for Carol. But before he can sing it, Johnson appears. Turns out, they are already living together. In the evening, Big Joe reveals to everyone the news of Phil once plotting against him, eliciting condemnation and disgust from everyone. Phil is isolated again. Johnson tells Phil to get out of Tucson. Tucson is Phil's hometown. Phil cannot leave, so he locks himself in his room, refusing to show up in front of everyone. The last man on Earth is too miserable. He has consumed all the provisions, and his house is in a mess. Phil, starving and mentally foggy, even starts eating toilet paper. Carol, worried about Phil's safety, convinces everyone to forgive Phil. Now Phil steps out of his room, sees everyone playing instruments and singing songs, all forgiving him. He is suddenly moved, but before Phil can express his gratitude, Johnson tackles him to the ground. Carol tells Johnson to let Phil go, but Johnson ties Phil up and throws him directly into the desert. As Johnson leaves, he gives Phil 3 days' worth of food and forbids him from entering Tucson. Phil can only console himself. At least there's 3 days' worth of food. If he walks quickly, he can reach the next city for supplies. But 20 minutes later, Phil has already consumed all the food and water. Phil can't understand. Clearly, he was the one who brought everyone together. But why? In the end, does he become the one scorned? Phil is alone, walking into the desolate and lonely depths of the desert. He has no direction, decides to go wherever he can, but he still wants to survive. So he returns to the road, hoping to encounter someone. Gradually, he falls asleep. The last man on Earth is on the verge of starving to death. When he wakes up again, he unexpectedly sees his ex-wife Carol. She brings food for Phil, because she knows Phil has a huge appetite, enough to eat the portions for 2 people in 1 meal. Now Phil realizes, Carol is a good woman. At this moment, Carol asks Phil, "Did you really write a song for me?" Phil nods. "Can you sing it for me?" Phil lifts his upper body. With the most sincere voice, he sings the most beautiful song. Carol is moved and says, "Let's go." Phil is somewhat incredulous. Carol explains, she doesn't want to be with someone who abandons people in the desert to die. She doesn't like someone without compassion. Phil is overjoyed. The two set off in the car to find a new home. Meanwhile, in the universe beyond Earth, Phil's astronaut brother is on a spaceship, sending distress signals to Earth, searching for survivors. The end of this film. This episode covers the entire first season of The Last Man on Earth. The question for this episode: if you were given $1 billion to live in a place without people for a year, could you bear it? If you could bear, comment 111 in the comments. If you couldn't bear, comment 222. Send your answers in the comments. This film is recommended for those who enjoyed it to watch the original. Alright, that's it for this episode. Remember to like and subscribe. See you next time. Bye.